glad to be here. I've been coming here for 24 years. I cannot believe it. I was just dating my soon-to-be husband when we first came. We were invited the second year of the conference, or rather, he was invited. He had already published a first book, and we fell in love with it and continued to come back, and John got more and more involved and is now literary director. So it's fun to be here with a book, actually. I'm interviewing somebody I absolutely adore, Francis Lamb, who is a cookbook publisher. He is the host of The Splendid Table, and he used to be on Top Chef. Was it Top Chef? I think so.
I think it was Top Chef.
There you go. And he's wonderful. I've known him forever, so it's a pleasure.
How exciting.
Yeah.
And you have a new book coming out.
I have a new book. I have a new book that just came out called Eat, Cook, Elle. And I have always loved traveling as a food writer. I've always loved traveling with more than just being a tourist, but really kind of investigating places and trying to feel a part of a place in a slightly more local way than if I were just visiting. And so to me, food and travel have been aligned all of my life. I traveled all over the world as a kid, and when I was about 4 years into my Wall Street Journal column, and I've now been doing it for a decade, I started to get really fascinated by what was happening in London. I was reading a lot about London chefs, a lot about what was going on in the food world in London. I became more and more fascinated after Ottolenghi became a huge hit in the US. And I realized that I had a book in there, and what I wanted to write was really about a city in culinary transformation, a city that had gone from having horrible food to having fantastic, I mean, seriously fantastic food in a very short period of time. And while I was doing the London Cookbook, which was really fun, and the food in London, by the way, is spectacular now. I mean, it is truly the culinary epicenter of Europe. I was thinking, what is that next city that is really going through a similar change? And to me, it was suddenly apparent it was Los Angeles, a city that has really never been known for great foods in the center of the city. If you went on the outskirts, you would find really fantastic immigrant food, but the restaurants in the center of town were a little bit boring. People were a little afraid of food. People went to see and be seen, but it wasn't a place where you really went to eat. And suddenly there's been this explosion in incredible restaurants and flavor.
And food trucks.
And food trucks. And some of that started actually with food trucks, absolutely. And it also, I talk a lot in the introduction about kind of the many things that will create culinary change in a city. Some of it has to do with Uber, which can transform the economics of a restaurant, which I find interesting, to the breakdown of the studio system after 2008, and the kind of the proliferation of writers' rooms across town, the proliferation of startups that kind of shifted the restaurant world away from those studios and let them spread out more into areas like Silver Lake and Los Feliz. Huge, obviously, incredible food in Venice Beach. So it was very fun. Very different food from London, much healthier, obviously. Very boldly flavored, very produce driven.
So where should we be going now in LA?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so many places to go. In Los Angeles, I mean, I love on Abbot Kinney Road and Venice Beach. I mean, I love Gelina, I love Justa, I love Mountain. Those three places are Travis Lett. I also love Charcoal, which is a wonderful restaurant, wonderful steakhouse there that's fantastic. It's a great donut shop on Abbot Kinney. I'm kind of starting here on the west side, but those are some real favorites there. In Santa Monica, I love Cassia, Vietnamese restaurant, and then really jumping to Silver Lake. I think there's a restaurant called Botanica in Silver Lake that has really beautiful kind of, I guess you would call it SoCal for lack of a better word, but by that I mean kind of great Southern California food, which to me means it has global flavors with incredible textures and layers and California produce, which is so extraordinary, but really beautiful food. A wonderful little Israeli place called Meze, which is basically a storefront and a couple chairs outside, and it's fantastic. I love Alimento, I like Squirrel, I like Kismet. I mean, this is what I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot.
And I love how your face just lights up when you talk about this.
Yeah.
It is your passion.
It is, it really is. I mean, I'm a screenwriter as well, and I had spent a lot of time in Los Angeles after film school, working for the studios, writing for the studios, and never really loving the food. I mean, I grew up in Paris, so I was very lucky to get used to very good food really early. And then when there was a Writers Guild strike in 2007, my son had just been born, and I thought, you know what, I am going to send in an article about food to the New York Times Magazine and see what happens. And they loved it. And suddenly I was doing that for 18 months, and the strike was over, but I had kind of gone down another path and was loving it, and things just kind of took off. And now I'm also back in the screenplay world.
You are?
I am.
Is it about food?
It is. It is. Yes, it is. So, yes, now I am merging two passions for a television series. Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yes. And London. Oh my gosh, I forgot to say London. Incredible food. I mean, I love the River Cafe. It is probably the best Italian food, I think, anywhere outside of Italy. Just beautiful, beautiful food. And that is kind of the place that I always go to whenever I'm there. It's really like a place called Quo Vadis in Soho. Duck Soup, another Soho restaurant, which is fantastic. Oh my gosh, there's so many. I like Barafina for tapas, fantastic tapas. Gymkhana and Dishoom for beautiful Indian food. Those are a couple of standouts, I would say. I could go on. You have to buy the book.
Buy the book.
Buy the London Cookbook. Buy Eat, Cook, LA. I mean, a lot of people use them as travel guides too, because I do talk about the restaurants and kind of why they're worth the trek and what makes them special.
So how do you find those delicious little restaurants in LA or London or Paris?
Yes. Very differently according to the cities. In London, when I started, I really did a great deal of homework in advance of my first trip, but I had also lived there, and I had also worked there as a screenwriter, so I had made kind of constant trips over many, many years, and I think that allowed me to see patterns of change that I wouldn't have if I was a local. So actually having a little distance was really helpful. But then after that initial homework and contacting chefs and talking to food friends and finding out what they liked, and then talking to chefs and finding out where they were eating, there's incredible generosity of spirit among the chefs in London. And I think a real pleasure at having somebody recognize that the city was in the throes of this incredible kind of culinary transformation and was really soaring. And so people were immensely generous. Chefs would recommend other chefs. There was no sense of competition. Quite extraordinary. But then there were times when I would just walk around certain areas that had great restaurants, and I would be a little bit of a spy. I mean, I'd peer into windows, and I'd go in and look at menus, and I'd talk to people, and I'd even ask people who were going in and out of restaurants what they ate. I'm kind of shameless, but I really, there was, for example, Duck Soup. I was walking through Soho in London one day, and I looked in the window of that place, and the food looked incredible. The place was packed, and everybody in there was clearly loving what they were eating. And I thought, okay, I gotta figure this one out. I gotta know what's going on.
So look for clues.
So I looked for clues, and then there was one bakery I went into where I had the most incredible Ras El Hanout tea cake, and I bit into it. I think before I'd even paid, I was starving, and I knew, oh my God, I need this recipe, and I just said to the guy behind the cash register, where's the chef? And he said, oh, it's Dean. If you really run fast and you kind of you leave Dean Street and you turn on the next street, you might find her. And I chased her down, and we ended up talking for 2.5 hours, and we ended up featuring her also in the Wall Street Journal. I mean, beautiful recipes and an incredible, incredible history. She'd married a Moroccan man, and so there was this wonderful influence of Moroccan spices and flavors with British baking that I found exceptional. And really what struck me about London was how incredibly international the food was. And then heartbreakingly, when I went back actually to do publicity, because it was also published there, it was the weekend that Brexit was announced. And so I saw both these incredible restaurants with such international staffs where cooks were in tears wondering if they would be able to stay there, if they could afford to stay there, if they were going to lose visas. And then people really told me that the book had a significance for them because it reflected a moment in time in which the city really prided itself on being international. And I did feel like I captured a moment there that I don't think will go away, but I think it's under assault. So,
Huh, interesting.
yeah.
So what's the next cookbook?
So, I mean, I will definitely do Paris because that's the book that's always been in me, and I was, there were reasons why I was waiting to do it as a third one, but yes. So yes, that's, and there are other cities that interest me. I mean, if I spoke Spanish really well, and I don't, I'm bilingual with French and Italian, but not Spanish, I would do Mexico City. And I've had people volunteer to go down to Mexico City with me and translate. so who knows? But that's a city I also think is really fascinating right now.
Yes.
But Paris is absolutely in my heart, and I've been doing research on it for years. So,
well, wonderful.
So that's next. Yeah.
Wonderful. Just a quick question, circling back to LA, since LA is not walkable, but you
so Los Angeles was really different to do the research because first of all, there's so much traffic, right? And so I did have to really map things down. I would map out areas, and I would spend a day in Silver Lake or Los Feliz and another day in Venice, or actually a week in Silver Lake, a week in Venice. I really treated the city not like one city, but like many different cities.
Yes.
And that gave me also, I think, a perspective on kind of how that city is so divided by character into different areas and different places. So that was exciting, but a lot of that research was different. It was really talking to my many, many, many friends in LA who love food and emailing them and saying, what are your 5 favorite restaurants? What are your 5 favorite dishes in those restaurants? And can you pass this email along to your 5 best foodie friends? And then I literally would look at those, and I hate to say aggregate, but I looked at what was similar in certain places and where there was overlap, and I kind of started with some of those places, and then I always sit down with chefs, and I will really do a kind of full 2-hour interview with them, even if I'm only going to write a paragraph, because I want their stories. I want them to know that I'm going to do right by them, and I also want them to become comfortable enough that they don't give me the recipes that are the show-off recipes, but are the ones that actually can translate to a home cook. I never want to dumb things down. I always want to find the thing that actually is makeable at home. And so I think once I've talked to a chef for a couple hours, and we've really kind of hit our stride and figured out kind of where we're going in this, then suddenly that opens up a different person, and a different dishes come out and suggestions, and
beautiful.
It's nice, yeah.
So if you had to give one tip about going out to eat, what would it be?
One tip about going out to eat, sharing. I mean, if you're only going to go to a restaurant once, and you're going with somebody else, even if it is a restaurant where it looks like you each order, nothing tapas style, you each order your courses. I just think it's fun to order more and share. And I think that a lot of people often will say, what's the best thing here? Or they'll ask a waiter. And I think that's not what to do, unless you get the sense that the waiter is a real foodie. I think that generally they are trying to push whatever is the signature dish or the fanciest dish, oftentimes, or they're supposed to, or they've been told to. I think you get a lot more by looking at what people are eating around you. Actually, I guess I do a lot of spying. I really do. I whenever I walk into a restaurant, I'm always doing that thing of looking at every single table as I'm winding my way to mine. Yeah, it's a little shameless, but really fun.
You're a detective.
I'm a detective in that respect. Yes, no, I definitely am, and I'm slightly shameless.